Welcome to the Brigham Young University Family History Library webinar series. My name is Braden Knutson. I will be your host for this webinar today. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us. As we go through our announcements here at the beginning, we'd like to invite you to participate in the polls that we have down at the bottom of the screen. And we will go through the introduction as well. Our next webinar will be on Tuesday, November 21st at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and that webinar is titled Family Search Memories, Connecting Relatives Near and Far, and that will be by Jean Naisbitt. And if you haven't noticed, our schedule has changed a little bit for this month, so next week, the webinars that we had scheduled for next week have been moved to different dates because of some family situations that are going on here. So we will still have those, they'll just be on different days. So keep your eyes out for um, those changed dates. So like I said, our next webinar will be on November 21st. And if you ever have any suggestions, feel free to email us. Our email address is down there at the bottom of the announcements box. So today we'll be pleased to hear from James Tanner, who will be giving a presentation titled Back Up Your Data Now or Cry. James Tanner has a bachelor's degree in Spanish and a master's degree in linguistics from the University of Utah. He received a Juris Doctor degree in law from Arizona State University. He worked for 39 years as an Arizona trial attorney. He previously owned a retail computer business and an Apple Macintosh software company. James has over 35 years of experience in genealogical research and is a blogger for Genealogy Star and the blog Rejoice and Be Exceeding Glad. He served for 10 years as a missionary at the Mesa, Arizona Family Search Library and is currently serving at the BYU Family History Library. He is the co-author or author of over 25 books on genealogical research and has presented at expos and conferences around the U.S. and Canada. James has 7 children and 33 grandchildren. We'd like to invite you to use the question and comments box that we have on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll make sure that all questions are answered by the end of the presentation. And we'll turn the time over to James.
Howdy, this is James Tanner. Glad to be here on another BYU Family History Library webinar, and remind everyone that these webinars are recorded and uploaded to our BYU Family History Library YouTube channel, and you can view them at your convenience. And we'd encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Helps us to gain a little traction in the world of YouTube, where there are millions of videos. Okay, today we're going to talk about back up your data now or cry. I suppose this sounds like a pretty serious topic, and it is one of those things that we really need to know about on a very periodic basis, kind of like remembering to brush our teeth and do things like that. It's just things that need to be done constantly in the background of everything else that we're carrying on with our lives. And the reasons why are pretty obvious. It's inevitable, almost absolutely, positively, without doubt, you are going to suffer some kind of a memory, online or data memory loss. You can just count on it. If you're living anywhere in the United States where you might have a power outage, that's going to happen without any kind of notice. There's going to be any number of many other things that could happen. And the idea here about backing up files is to do it regularly. And regularly, it can mean every few minutes, actually. That's helpful. But in the case that you don't do that, then it needs to be done on a regular basis, and at least as regular as any work that you do on your computer that has any significant impact on your life, or how sad you might be if you lost it all. This is really an update of a video from a year ago, and since there's been a few technological changes and things have happened over the past year, we decided this is not an exact repeat of the video. This is a completely different take on the subject. And I realize, of course, that it may sound like we're repeating ourselves, but we are. And because backing up is something we have to do considerably, consider all the time, then it's very, very timely to have reminders that we need to back up our information. So not too long ago, what happened to me, and another reason why I was thinking about this subject, is I have, and obviously it wasn't quite as bad as what it looks like in this image here. My computer did not shatter and throw glass all around the room, but it may as well have had happened. What happened is that I have or was using at the time, I no longer have that computer, by the way, was using at the time an iMac, uh, an Apple iMac, and it had a substantially large hard drive. I think it was a 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive, which is a lot of information. And uh, I noticed that it all of a sudden got a read-write error, meaning that the drive was going bad. A notice came up on the screen that said, there's a testing program on Macintosh computers that runs in the background of the operating system, and it tells you that there's something wrong with your hard drive. Well, I kept getting that notice about 2 or 3 times is all I needed to tell me that I had to trade out that hard drive. And so basically my everything that I had done for probably about 2 or 3 or 4 years was on that hard drive. Now, that could have been a catastrophe, and it turned out to be merely an inconvenience. What happened was that the drive did go bad. It stopped working. I then had a backup. I had what was called Time Machine, which is the Apple uh, backup program, and it backs up everything on your hard drive, everything, including your operating system, all your programs, all your data files, everything is backed up to an external hard drive. And then I took the computer in to a local repair store, and they swapped out the drive and put in a brand new, larger hard drive for me. And then I took it home and hit the restore button, and about a day and a half later, it took about that long to put all that information back on my computer, but my computer was up and running, and I had everything, and I hadn't lost any information. Okay, so that's kind of the happy ending story, where the princess gets to marry the prince, and the all of the things happen. Lived happily ever after, and all that kind of stuff. Well, what happened, of course, is that as a little bit longer time went on, I began to distrust the machine uh, as itself, because I began to think, well, if the hard drive's already crashed and the machine is kind of getting flaky, it's time to get a new computer. And so I swapped out that computer and got a brand new iMac. Um, so this is another process. We're going through technological change. Things are happening. Computers are changing constantly, and systems are changing. I've had at least 3 or 4 upgrades of the Apple operating system in the last few months, and I know that the other operating systems, Android and the Windows operating system from Microsoft, all of those go through upgrades constantly. So we're evolving as we go along, and this technological change can also be a reason for backing up the computer. So not really quite as bad as having your machine, crash into pieces, but that also could happen. It's not impossible that it gets knocked off the table or desk or wherever it is, crashes to the floor, and that's the end of the machine. It's time to think about the inevitable, and that is that something really bad could happen. And as for me, this nearly did happen, and it didn't nearly happen just a short time ago. So what saved my data? It was Time Machine. Time Machine is a program from Apple that backs up the entire hard drive. Microsoft Windows has exactly the same kind of program, the Windows backup program that will back up your entire hard drive. You also can install programs on your computer that will do the same thing. It will back up everything, including all your programs and your operating system. Which makes it more convenient in trying to restore and replace information that's lost on a primary hard drive on your computer. Now, catastrophes do happen. I think if anyone in 2017, if anybody has been, listening to any of the news in our country, in the United States, or internationally, you realize that we've had a monumental number of natural catastrophes. We've had floods and hurricanes and stores and even in Mexico with huge earthquakes and all of those kinds of things that happen. But believe me, it doesn't have to be nearly that catastrophic to have your computer stop operating. It can merely be a power surge, which is a little bit of when the electricity drops. For instance, the power line goes down, they turn the power back on, and when the power comes back on, it sends an extra amount of electric current, and it burns out your computer. We have what are called surge protectors, but maybe you have a very old surge protector and you haven't even replaced that for like 15 years or something, and it's sitting there. It obviously, in my opinion, does no longer works, and if you really want a surge protector, you should replace those on a periodic basis. So because catastrophes happen, you can count on it. It's not something that we say, this might happen to you. We're saying it will happen to you. It is absolutely sure that your computer will crash at some point in time. It is just the nature of the beast. And the longer you go and the older your computer system is, and the longer it's been running and your hard drive's been running, then your chances that it is going to crash increase. Every minute, every year that computer runs, there's a greater chance that at some point in time, one or more of the components of the computer are going to cease working. Okay, so what could happen? Okay, first of all, you could, and let's start with the devices. Your phones, your tablets. You could lose your phone or drop it. Someone I know recently had a brand new iPhone, just barely walked out of the store with the iPhone, and the first thing that happened before even more than an hour or two had passed is the iPhone was dropped and completely shattered the glass screen on the iPhone. Well, it was off to the repair place, and a new screen was put on, and the iPhone was repaired. Fortunately, the phone functions properly, but you can see that some things can happen very easily. You can crash your computer's hard drive. Hard drives, the internal storage mechanisms that are currently being used by computers are mechanical devices. They actually run on an internal motor that's spinning a hard disk, a piece of metal inside there, and they have a life. They have a time to what's called a mean time to failure, MTF, which is the when half of those devices have already failed. Now they're remarkably reliable, but reliability does not mean indestructibility, or reliability does not mean that it will last forever. It's just a matter of time before that particular device decides to bite the dust. So that's what happens. Your house could burn down. Okay, we can think of all sorts of things that could happen from here, from floods, or it could be as simple as having a backed up drain. When I was younger, I came home from a trip in the summertime in Phoenix, Arizona, 115 degrees in the shade. We opened the front door and water ran out the front door. And for the rest of the week, I was there by myself. I was like 12, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, and that that was an interesting week while I was the only one left in that house to pull all the carpet out, do everything that needed to be done to get the house fixed. But had anything been in there and electronic on that in that house, it's very likely that that would have been ruined. Somebody can steal it. You never know. We're here at Brigham Young University, and one of the interesting things about Brigham Young University is that they have their own university security police, which is what everyone has. But we also have a weekly newspaper here called The Universe, and in The Universe they have a very interesting thing. Every week they publish all of the police reports from the campus and from Provo and from adjoining city of Orem. And so you can read the police report every week, and it is almost like clockwork that someone loses a backpack or a computer or a phone, uh, and someone else steals it. So even in a place like this, smaller town, more security than you would have someplace else, it's still possible to happen. So can you think of anything else that might happen or can or will happen? Don't stay up late tonight thinking about it, but you might start worrying about doing something to protect yourself. Now, let's say, for example, let's ask a simple question. What if your house burned down? Would you lose all of your computer files? Would the information you have on your computer be lost? And that's the kind of the key question here. What some things that could realistically happen, is that going to create a situation where you will lose information that is either irreplaceable or would require a significant effort to replace? So that's kind of the information. And let's understand a backup. We're talking about backing up our data so that we don't go through the loss process, that we don't lose any ground from the effort that we put forth to create information, particularly our genealogical information, where we've spent maybe what happens over a term of years, where you create more and more information about your family. Then the loss becomes even more acute as you get further and further into spending that much time on one particular set of information and data. But what is a backup? A backup is, first of all, there are two levels. We have what we could call individual file backup and then entire system or global backup. Okay, so I could take a file that I'm working on and move it into some computer. Are we back? How appropriate could that possibly be in the middle of talking about technological crashes and downturns to have this webinar out of the hundreds that we've done? We probably only have this happen about once out of every 50 or more. and yet we went dropout. Okay, well, I that's your absolute uh, example of what can happen on this in the to any kind of equipment, no matter how well you are. We got two different computers here, by the way, and we're hooked up directly to the internet, and all this stuff still happens. Okay, so that's life. Now, anybody out there not hear us? If you can't, type in and tell us you can't hear us. Okay, now I'm going to have to go to the next step here. If I have any kind of next step, yeah, there we go. We have to click down here to get the next step. Ah, we got it. Okay. A backup is not a backup unless the files will not be destroyed when the main device fails or is destroyed. Okay, that's kind of the concept of it. So if a flying saucer comes down and zaps your iPhone or your Android phone or whatever, and you lose everything on that, then it's not backed up. So if there's something happens like that, then you're basically going to lose the information. And any kind of a disaster backup, like a disaster is floods or a house burning down or something like that, major type disasters, are not going to be backed up if the backup is sitting next to the computer. Okay, so if the house burns down and all you have is a external hard drive with all your data on it, then your hard drive gets fried along with your computer. So you're really not getting any kind of backup uh, level of confidence that you're going to be able to recover any of the information that you lost. So when you back up your data, now here's some things that we want you to do. These are the things to do. First of all, make separate copies on different media or devices of all your valuable working files. And this includes your entire computer, if that makes any difference to you. It takes me, when I get a new computer, it usually takes a matter of more than a month and sometimes into 2 months before all of the information and all of the programs and all of the settings and all of the passwords and everything else are worked out on the new computer. It just takes a tremendous amount of effort to move from one computer to the next. And I would rather not do that I would rather do it on my schedule and when I have the time to do it than have it forced on me by having the whole thing disappear and disappear into the void out there. So do use some type of global backup system. This means if you're using a Windows machine or if you're using another device like an Apple machine, that you use the programs that are available that back up all of the information on your hard drive on a regular basis. And the other part of that is it needs to be automatic. It can't involve your remembering to back up the data. It has to do something that operates in the background and does that automatically and continues to back it up in order for you to do it. Now, where you back it up is where we're going to get to in a minute. Okay, so here's some of the things we don't do. Now, after I've talked about what we are supposed to do, let's talk about what we're not supposed to do. Secondly, we're not supposed to procrastinate making backup copies. Just don't put it off. The longer you put it off, the more vulnerable your data is, and that is when the problem is going to occur. It's just like what happened just a moment ago with this webinar. You never know it's going to happen. It's just sort of random things that can happen that can possibly disconnect you from the internet or lose all your data. Don't use old media. Okay, now I have people who have their original flash drive and everything is on that original flash drive, and they are just, that's like the most valuable thing in their lives, but the thing is like 15 years old and they're going to just keep using it and using it and using it. And most of the media is very reliable, but the longer you use it, the more likely it is that the media will crash. Okay, and don't ever assume you have a copy. Don't ever say, "Oh, well, I think I've got a copy back here someplace." Well, that's not a backup. A backup is something that you can call upon uh, as quickly as you need the information that has been lost. And so you need to be concerned about that and know that that's something to happen. So here's the elements of a good backup system. This is the best way to see how a backup system works. It's automatic or it's very easily utilized. In other words, all you have to do is click a button and it backs up everything. That's great, but you're still got to remember to click the button. And in this case, if it's automatic or it's set on a schedule, it backs up once a day, twice a day, once every hour, every half hour, every 5 minutes, whatever. Then you have a program that will help you to actually save data from being lost. Now, it needs to be cost effective here. You know, there's lots of systems out there that are very complex backup systems that cost quite a bit of money. So you're going to have to weigh the effectiveness of those systems as against the actual value of the data you're backing up. Now, I'm going to use another example. I am probably connected 12, 14, 15, 16 hours a day to some kind of an electronic device, either a phone or a tablet or a computer or something of that nature. By the way, I don't have any data that I care about on my phone. I do not store anything on my phone at all. Nothing. Every single thing on my phone, every photograph, every note, every record that I have on my phone is automatically backed up off the phone online. So I don't even have, I don't, you know, if I lose my phone, I'm going to be sad because I have an iPhone and they're not cheap. But on the other hand, I don't lose any data if I lose a phone or if it goes south and doesn't work any longer. It needs to be safe. Now, what does it mean by safe? Well, that example I just gave of having the hard drive sitting next to your computer and the house burns down does not safe. That doesn't mean the data is not safe from a reasonably foreseeable uh, issue or problem. And in this life, you never know when the unreasonable and unforeseeable may occur, rather than just the reasonably foreseeable something. It also has to be long lasting. It has to last at least long enough until you need it again. You can't have something that goes out of date. Um, and there's an issue here that's called migration, the migration of the data. And it means you're taking the information that you have in old programs and old storage devices, and as newer programs and as newer storage devices come out, then you have you move it to the new device. Okay, so for example, I have a daily, almost daily, weekly journal that I keep, that I've kept for years and years and years, and I've been keeping it for like 15 years, and I kept it on uh, in a program called MacWrite, which was one of the original Apple Macintosh programs. Well, there came a day when I decided I'd moved on to other computers and other programs. I wanted my old files. And then all of a sudden I realized that they were sitting in a program that no longer existed. And that was panic because I had years of my journal on technically on some media. I don't remember if it was still on a floppy disk or if it was on, I think it was on CDs, but it wouldn't, nothing would seem to read it. Well, fortunately, I was able to get an old computer and I was able to get a copy of MacWrite that was running and save them as text files and then move them to a new media, and eventually we saved all the files. And that was something you'd think, well, you're going to learn a lesson from that. Well, I then I'll put it into Microsoft Word. I thought, here's a reliable program. Microsoft's going to be around for a long time. We'll put all these programs, all these uh, long journals entries that I had over years and years into Microsoft Word. As time went on, the technology changed. Microsoft Word changed their file format, and the old copies of Microsoft Word files weren't recognizable by the newest versions of Microsoft Word. Once again, I was back panicking, trying to reconstruct my files. And then I found an online uh, open open access program um, that was able to read the old files and transferred them into text files, once again back into a basic text file, and was able to save the document. So don't assume that because your machine is still turning on and the little and you're getting an image on your screen, that the information is not at risk. We need to be very careful of that. And also make sure that a good backup system doesn't end when you die or become incapacitated. So this goes for considering online backup systems where you're paying a monthly fee. If you're paying a monthly fee to have your information backed up online, you either better set up some kind of legal trust arrangement where the trustee is forced to pay for that, at least until your family and heirs can get the information offline, or some other arrangements are made, because you'll end up losing that information in the long run. What is the cost of the failure of to back up your data? How much does it cost you? Well, the cost is the cost of recreating all of the work that's lost. In my case, as I began to do to computerize my genealogy about 30 years ago, moving through a series of different computers and programs, over time I became extremely obsessive about the concept of backing up my data in a whole variety of different places. And when online uh, storage became available, then I made sure everything was online. I made sure it was on every type of backup media that I could find. I moved from floppy disks to hard disks to CDs and DVDs and all the different kinds of media that we've been using in the past. Because I realized that the cost of recreating all of this information is monumental. Now, today I have an out by doing my genealogical research, because I can put all of my research online on a big program like FamilySearch.org's Family Tree, and if all my data is there, then I basically have a backup that is not going to disappear. But the problem you have with the Family Search Family Tree, and that many people complain about, is that other people can come in and alter or change the data. Well, yeah, that's true, but that's really not as great a concern as losing all of the data at once. And if we have it on a different variety of backups, then I'm not relying entirely on Family Search or any other one backup system. Here's the real bottom line question. Do you have anything that you would consider to be irreplaceable on your computer or stored on your devices? If you do, if it's photographs of your family that are now not going to be able to be replaced for any number of reasons, in genealogy we have a lot of information that perhaps is irreplaceable, and that is the major concern. So whatever it costs to do an adequate backup should be factored into the time and the effort that it takes to do all this work and produce a large file, family file. Now, global backup is the ultimate kind of solution for all of the information that you have. So first of all, most of the global backup systems are set up on an automatic uh, every few minutes kind of backup. Now, that doesn't mean it goes through your whole computer and backs up everything every few minutes. That's not what happens. It backs up only the data that's been changed. So that's the marvel of computers. Somebody can write a program that says, look and see what's changed and copy only the new data onto the backup. So everything gets globally backed up, but it only incrementally takes on all of the new information. It's regular. It comes around in my case, the backup that I'm using is every few minutes. It backs up any data that I've been working on, and it backs up everything. So it backs up your files, it backs up your programs, it backs up um, your operating system. Now, in this day and age, a lot of the programs that we're using are not installed on our computers. So, for example, if you're working on a program like Ancestry, Family Search, MyHeritage, or Find My Past, and you have your data up in there in your family tree, and you've managed to keep everything there on one of those programs or some other program out there, WikiTree or Genie or some other program where you can store all your data, then what's going to happen is that it's already backed up. That's backed up, but the rest of the information on your computer may not be backed up. So you have to look and see what is actually being backed up. And the ideal is that everything on your computer is backed up. Now, talking just a moment about media. Right now we have essentially two media that are advisable for backup. One is hard drives. Hard drives are the price of storing information on a hard drive is crashing down. The benchmark I'm using currently is the cost of an 8 terabyte drive. That's an 8,000 gigabyte drive. That's for some people, that's an unimaginable amount of storage space because you could work seriously. You could spend your rest of your life, unless you are a gamer or a person playing online computer games and gaming, or you are a person who is downloading movies every day of your life just because you love to download movies or something like that. You are not going to fill up an 8 terabyte hard drive in your lifetime. It's just not going to happen usually. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but it's pretty unlikely. You know, you might be saying saving a copy of every email, all the spam and all the junk mail you get. If that's the case, maybe you might start filling it up. But it's a really large amount of storage space, really, really large. And the price has dropped now. And the current price, and I'll show this in a minute, but I'll repeat that for a very large hard drive that will no more than adequately back up your entire system is $159. That's the average price for an 8 terabyte hard drive today. And there's no reason, because of the time and the effort involved in computers, that you don't attach a couple of these hard drives to your system and use them as backups. I have a redundancy. I have an all system backup drive that uses Time Machine off of my Apple. Could have used any of the programs off of Microsoft or any other backup program. And then I have other hard drives, two 8 terabyte hard drives, as a matter of fact, that I use to back up all my other data. And I back up the files as I acquire and save those files. Then I back them up to the computer, uh, to the external storage drives. They're primarily, in my case, they are scanned documents and photographs. So I have literally hundreds of thousands of files on these external hard drives. And then I also have an online storage program that backs up my main computer and all my attached hard drives. So that the amount of data now I'm backing up is just over 8 terabytes of information. So it wouldn't even all fit on one even very large hard drive anymore. Okay, so now what about online? What about online storage? Okay, there are some limitations. First of all, you've got to be connected to the internet. So that's an expense. You've got to be, and you've got to have the capability of doing that. If you have very small storage concerns, if you're measuring your storage in gigabytes rather than in terabytes, then you may be able to have everything online in a free online storage. So that may be something that you can do for free. Dropbox, Google's Google Drive, Microsoft's OneDrive. Um, there are a number of others. Amazon has a drive. All of these, if you pay or have some kind of a relationship with these companies, have downloaded their programs or paid for the storage capacity, then you can store your information online rather easily. Otherwise, if you're looking for global backup storage for quite a lot of data, you will necessarily have to go to a dedicated online backup program. Um, and do your research. You need to go out and see how much it costs and how you feel it's cost effective and what kind of reviews all of these different programs have gotten and whether or not there were there was any possibility of their failure or inability. Also need to understand what the total cost of these backup is. There may be a standard fee for backing up your file every month, and it might be something rather minimum, but there may be also a fee for downloading the copy of your data if you lose it. So there's a secondary cost out there that they just don't tell you right up front. I mean, they do, it's all there, but if you have to understand that you may have to pay to get your data downloaded, and it may depend on the amount of data that you have. Well, for example, I'm using a service, and I hesitate to name any particular service or company or process of doing backup because this changes constantly, and that's why I said you need to do your own research and come to your own conclusions, but and look at the rates and what's happening with it. The backup company I use has a nominal fee. It's an amount of a few bucks a month to back up my entire computer and all my attached drives. Yeah, but then what happens is that if I crashed and I had to restore any of those drives, then I have to pay a cost per gigabyte of downloading the information or getting a replacement hard drive from the company. And I looked at that price, and it's not just $5 a month. It's basically it comes out to be less than the cost of a big external hard drive. So from my standpoint, it still makes sense, and I'm still uh, willing to spend the $5 a month or $10 a month or whatever it costs to have my system backed up. Now, redundancy rules. Now, what that means is a redundant system means that it has more than one place, and this is absolutely necessary that you have your data backed up in more than one level and on more than one device. You can back it up online, but make sure you have the same data on your computer or your hard drive, your external hard drive, and perhaps even on some other devices. I've stopped using CDs and DVDs because it's obvious that those as storage devices are no longer going to be viable for the very simple reason that if you've gone out and purchased a new computer lately, you'll realize that none of them have DVD or CD drives. So you're just basically getting into a situation where you're going to be putting it on to an old um, media. What's the best system? The best system is one that works. In other words, that in the event that you have a crash, like I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, that I can actually, even if it took me days to back up, to restore my backup, that I was able to restore all the information to my computer and I was back up and running and hadn't lost any information at all. And in the case of having a time machine backup, then that obviates the need to spend any money to get the data from the online backup system. So it's kind of a fail-safe. In other words, if all of my computers were destroyed, I would still have everything out there online. If one of my hard drives crashes, then I have a backup for that that I can restore all that information. So it's it's sort of a system where you have as much redundancy and as many things as you can. So here's the basics. The basics are you have your computer or your device. You back that up to another device, in this case a hard drive. You back it up again to another type of media device, in this case perhaps a flash drive, or you back it up to the cloud, online backup service. And the basics would be you would use any two of those three, and the answer would be that would depend on And the answer of how you do that and what choice you make depends on the amount of data you have, how much hysteria would be involved if you lost it, and how much time it would take you to recreate it. So that's kind of the measure of which ones you're going to get and how much money you're going to pay for it. So this is what's doing. So what's going on? What are the things we want to avoid right now in doing backup systems? Primarily, the main one is CDs or DVDs. These systems are on their way out. It is likely that we will have some kind of DVD um, uh, recovery systems that are available for quite a long time. Uh, I would guess that it's going to be a matter of maybe a few years, but the handwriting's there on the wall. Uh, we are already looking at a situation where none of the new computers come with almost none. There are still some models you can buy that have uh, internal DVD drive, but many of the new computers and none of the external devices like tablets or phones have backup capability to CDs or DVDs. Okay, and the good news, if there is any good news in all of this, is that the storage costs are dropping rapidly. Told you I'd get into that. So here's what the cost is today. The first cost here is an 8 terabyte external hard drive is about $159 on Amazon. Um, that puts it at the optimal drive. Now, what's coming down the pike? We have uh, 10 terabyte hard drives and that are out there, but they're going to skip those and they're going to 16 terabyte hard drives. And they've already started talking about the possibility of creating 32 terabyte hard drives and larger capacity drives. Um, and so the idea that we're going to have kind of an unlimited, so the question of storage is no longer one of those issues that we talk about. We don't worry about file size. I don't worry about how many pixels, megapixels I'm taking pictures. I don't care how big the file is because I have more storage capacity than I'll ever have time to take pictures in the rest of my life. So that's the way it is now. Um, and as far as online storage, look carefully at that because some of them have graduated uh, costs depending on the amount of storage. So you might see something that says back up your computer for a dollar a day a month or something like that, some ridiculous price. And then when you get into it, it turns out that the amount of data that you really need to have for backup is going to cost you considerably more. So just be careful to find out about the total. Today, a 1 terabyte flash drive is about $500 to $600. By the way, it's come down from about $1,500 over the past year and a half or 2 years. So the price on flash drives is dropping rapidly. Now, here's kind of some insight as to what's going to happen in the very near future. The cost of what's called solid state drives, or SSDs, is the generic term for all of these solid state drive systems or flash drives or thumb drives or whatever else you want to call them. But the internal ones that they're building for computers now, many of the new computers are coming out with 500 gigabyte flash drives, internal SSD solid state devices. Now these are not hard drives. These are not mechanical devices. They are electronic devices and their reliability is a magnitude greater than a hard drive. They do, if you drop it off of a cliff, it will break and it will not work. But they're a lot more reliable and long lasting. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to last forever, and they may very well not last forever. But they're getting to the point where they're very reliable. In the very near future, computers will start coming with very high levels of internal flash drive. The new iMac Pro at this time in November of 2017 when this is being recorded. The iMac Pro is coming out with is up to 4 terabytes of flash drive of solid state device storage capability, and supposed to be introduced sometime before the end of 2017. So there will be a drop in the price as more and more as computers get larger and larger capacity flash drives, then the price will start to come down. And I would not be a bit surprised that within the next year or two that I am purchasing an 8 terabyte flash drive or even larger flash drive to take over the task of backing up my data and retiring my hard drives. Online storage for a computer and peripherals runs as kind of a median out there of about $60 a year to store all of the information on one computer and all the attached hard drives to that computer. So for me, that's about the price that I'm paying right now, and it is 8 terabytes of data that I'm storing. So that's a reasonable cost per terabyte and per piece of information. So the whole story here is avoid this. Avoid crying, avoid the crisis, avoid the hysteria of losing your data and having your hard drive crash and losing all the work that you've done, and take the simple steps of finding out, well, it's not so simple, but the doable steps of making backups and making sure that the information is copied onto separate media in a separate place where it can be restored even if your house burned down or some other disaster occurred. So back up all your data. Okay, thanks for watching. This has been another of the BYU Family History Library YouTube will be uploaded to the BYU Family History Library YouTube channel, and they will continue in the future doing this. And please remember to subscribe. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for participating today in our webinar series. I'd like to thank James for all of the hard work that he puts into these presentations and the good quality that they bring to the teaching that we have here available. We'd like to apologize for the technical difficulties that we experienced today, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for our next webinar. And we hope you have a great weekend. Thanks.